accepted.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started since it's 7. Except you can hear the dogs in the background. Welcome everybody to this Blue School sponsored by the United Volunteers, Democratic Volunteers of Alabama. We're a grassroots organization. We don't have a bank account. We aren't a PAC. We're just trying to fill in gaps that other Democratic organizations need help with. So here we are, grassroots Democrats all. And tonight we're going to talk about the legislature. And I'm going to share my screen for a moment, but if this doesn't work for discussion, I'll unshare it. But it'll be easier for me and for you all if you see kind of what I'm thinking and the way I want the direction of this discussion to go, if I just go ahead and share my screen with some slides that I made, okay? So, okay, so here's, I'm not going to put the slideshow on because I think I'm going to want to refer to some other things that are going on my, in my Safari bar. So I think I'm just going to leave it like this and go up and down. But basically, the Alabama legislature is complicated and I never know what's up or what's down. And so trying to organize it in a way that makes sense and so that we can all discuss what's happening in the legislature is a challenge, but it's something I'm going to try to do. How does the legislature work? I'm not sure that the people on the call know this, but it's really pretty common for people not to know how this works. But bills are filed by House and Senate members during session and also before session, and over 1,100 bills have been filed so far this year. And if it seems like that's complicated, well, that's one of the reasons why. Each of the bills is read and then referred to a committee, okay? Then those bills are debated in committee, or they have hearings where people can speak. Maybe they're amended in committee and then they're passed or voted out to the floor, or they're not. And if they're voted against, that's called dying in committee, okay? And that happens every once in a while. When they get to the floor of either the House or the Senate, amendments are offered, there's debate, the amendments are voted on and either accepted or rejected. And then the vote on the bill with all the amendments is voted up or down. And if it's voted yes, then the bill's engrossed. And what engrossed means is that all the amendments are organized into the body of the bill to make the bill whole, and the amendments are just automatically incorporated. And then the bill starts all over again in the other body. If it started in the House, then it goes to the Senate. If it started in the Senate, and then it goes to the House. Then, if a bill passes both bodies and they're identical bills, it can be referred to the governor for signature, which is called enacted. If the bills aren't identical when they finish in the House and the Senate, then they go to a conference committee for resolution, and then the resolved bill goes back to both bodies for another vote. Does anybody have any thoughts about that? Did I explain that correctly? You feel pretty good about that, or did I leave something out? Anybody? Okay. Well, from here, I'm going to start talking about some specific bills, okay? And I tried to organize these by subject matter, and also keep in mind that there are subjects that people are really passionate about, and I may skip over that subject because it's not one I thought of talking about. So if there's a bill or a subject that you're really passionate about, and I don't talk about any bills related to that subject, we'll talk about them at the end. It will be fine. We'll get it done. But let's start with bills about maternal or parental health. Okay. There's actually a good bill that's been enacted, a couple of them. paid parental leave, which Vivian Figures sponsored in the Senate, has passed both House and been signed and is enacted into law. And that means there'll be options for people to have maternity and paternity leave, which which was never an option before. There's also maternity Medicaid presumptive approval, which means when a woman shows up pregnant at her doctor's office, she'll be presumed to be eligible for Medicaid even before the paperwork is done, which means she can get into care much quicker because the healthcare services will be available to her under the presumption that she has Medicaid. So that was a bill that was shepherded through the Senate first by Linda Coleman Madison, and then Marilyn Lance actually sponsored the same bill in the House. And that one's also been enacted. So those are both pretty cool things. Postpartum depression screening tool development has passed the House. That's sponsored by a Republican, Representative Hope Jones. And then the postpartum depression screening and treatment for Medicaid moms has passed out of committee in the Senate. Okay, now that's a much bigger bill. What I mean by that is it requires a lot more funding. The postpartum depression screening tool is estimated to cost the public health department about $500,000, but the postpartum depression screening and treatment for Medicaid moms was estimated to cost about $2 million. So that one has actually been passed out of committee, but I think it's been I can't remember what it's called, corralled in by the chair. I don't think it's gotten to the floor yet because the chair has hung on to it, probably because of the funding issue, because the budgets haven't yet passed the House and the Senate. Anyway, so that's those are the ones I wanted to talk about for maternal and parental health. There's also healthcare and insurance bills that haven't been enacted, but the tax credit bill for donations to rural hospitals has passed the House. And the Alpha bill, basically, a lot of people who aren't in favor of this bill call it a junk, call it a junk healthcare bill where health insurance that isn't very good health insurance will be able to be provided by Alpha Insurance, but that is passed the House as well. And then there are two bills related to healthcare that have passed the Senate. One is to raise the age of consent from 14 to 16, and the other is a bill that prohibits health insurance companies from telling doctors or pharmacists whether they can talk about cheaper alternatives to treatment and pharmaceuticals. So those have both passed the Senate. Criminal justice, there's been some good news. The Second Chance bill has been enacted. That's the bill that'll allow about 150 or 200 prisoners who were initially sentenced under the three strikes sentencing of the 1990s and got life sentences for nonviolent crimes. Those mostly men will be potentially up to have their sentences reviewed. And that's a really big deal for those 150 to 200 prisoners. Drug court is changing. It's going to be called accountability courts, and it'll include veterans and individuals with mental illness will be able to be in those drug courts and be eligible for diversion rather than imprisonment. So that's probably another good bill that came out. The Alabama Criminal Enterprise Database has passed the House, which is thought by the 21 people who didn't vote for it, which were all Democrats, to be a profiling bill. It's passed the House, but not the Senate. And then the ability to get convicted felons who've had their ability to vote restored, for them to actually be told that happened by by the Pardon and Paroles Board. That bill has passed the Senate. Right now, the Pardon and Paroles Board doesn't have any responsibility for telling people who've had their voting rights restored that they have. And this puts some responsibility on the system to make sure that those people know that they've had their voting rights restored. There was a good news in gun violence prevention. The prohibition against Glock switches was enacted. Um, and there's also a bill that prohibits individuals charged with violent crimes and domestic violence when they're released pending trials from having access to their guns. And that's another safety bill, gun safety bill that has had a lot of pushback from the pro-gun lobby, but it's been being carried by a Republican, which seems to make a difference in being able to get some of these gun violence prevention bills passed. Um, there was a substance abuse bill that passed that criminalized inhalant possession or use, like poppers. And then there's another bill that's actually called the Vivian Figures Clean Air Act, and I think that might be a joke, that prohibits vaping in public places, and that's been reported out of committee in the Senate. There were some environmental bills that were enacted. One theoretically should be a good bill, but for public and private sewer and wastewater systems to come under the jurisdiction of the Public Service Commission instead of no jurisdiction at all. However, our Public Service Commission being what it is, it doesn't always mean that there'll be any supervision. And then another bill sponsored by Representative Rafferty to try to get the Environmental Management Department of Alabama to investigate for toxic substances hasn't come out of committee, but it's sponsored by Neil Rafferty, and it's probably going to sit in committee. Everybody's heard about the immigration bills. There are three that have passed the Senate, SB 63, 53, and 55, which all have to do with more monitoring for undocumented immigrants in custody, fingerprint and DNA samples. The second one is actually criminalizing people who help undocumented people, like creates the crime of human smuggling if someone is transported. That's SB 53, and that's one that's coming up, probably coming up for a House vote. It either happened today or it'll happen, this is Tuesday. It may happen Thursday. So if you haven't called your state senator, your state House member about that bill, making it illegal to transport undocumented people, please go ahead and call. This is again, it criminalizes someone who is not undocumented and has not committed a crime. And then finally, Chris Elliott's bill to make sure that Alabama doesn't recognize out-of-state driver's license for people from states where you don't have to prove whether or not you're documented to get it, is another bill that came out of the Senate and is in the House now. And then Ernie Yarborough's HB 7 that allows law enforcement to enter directly into agreements with the DOJ and Homeland Security without going through our state government, our Attorney General, and also sets requirements that jails report quarterly the number of undocumented immigrants that they have incarcerated got reported out of committee in the House, and it's another bill that you need to be calling your House members about. The What is a Woman bill passed on anti-LGBTQIA legislation. April Weaver carried that bill in the Senate, and that's probably, she found it easier to get it through than Susan DuBose did last year in the House, although the same bill was carried by Susan DuBose in the House, and the bill passed. It requires that people be the gender that their birth certificate says they are, and has a lot of other legal definitions of words that probably didn't need to be legislated. The Don't Say Gay bill expanded to 12th grade, passed out of House committee, and so probably is facing a vote on the House floor. So you might want to call your House member about that. And so did the the bill barring drag presentations in schools or libraries, and also it prohibits sharing facilities with people whose birth certificates don't share the same gender. So just more mean tactics to erase trans and gay people from our world. The anti-library bills have not moved much. The jail the librarians bill hasn't moved out of committee. The drag show bill has, so that was wrong. I didn't correct that when that happened yesterday. The removal of library board members by 2/3 votes of the appointing authority has passed out of a Senate committee, so that one's moving a little bit. So that's another one that Reed Freely has a lot of concerns about. Big Brother watching over library boards, and then a brand new bill that allows parents to send book lists to school libraries, and allows parents to have in direct direct right of asking school libraries to remove books they don't like. Just dropped on April 10th. And that's the new way that Moms for Liberty is trying to, again, have some effect on free speech in school libraries. The anti-protest bill passed out of Senate committee. That was Arthur Orr's bill that prohibits people from being too close to the residents of a subject of a protest. And also from blocking roads for protest. And I think it allows for a felony charge if those things happen. So it's a pretty intense bill. It hasn't been passed in the Senate. It's only passed out of committee. But if you have concerns that it's an invasion of free speech, please give your senators a call. And then finally, the education bills. I hope that's the last one. Oh God, it's not. Like I said, there's a million bills, you all. And these are just the highlighted bills that I decided to talk about tonight. But the education budget passed the Senate and has gone to the House. It's the biggest budget there's ever been in education. There's a good bill from Roger Smitherman about education related to violence prevention and conflict resolution required before graduation from high school that also passed the Senate. The Ten Commandments bill isn't yet out of committee. That's good. And then the Susan DuBose's House bill requiring local boards to adopt a policy regarding getting time off for religious instruction and credit for religious instruction died in committee in the House, but in the Senate, it's still being debated in committee. And there was a big debate, I think either yesterday or today, about the same bill, but in the Senate. And then finally, I talked about the restoration of voting rights bills that is passed the Senate. And then there's also been a statewide registration database, and the prohibition of using ERIC as a verification database, which Wes Kishin sponsored. And that has passed the Senate, but it's been carried over to the call of the chair, which means that the chair's hanging on to it and hasn't sent it to the House yet. And I'm not sure why that is, but it may have something to do with another bill that's related to using credit databases to determine residency for voters that we've all heard about just lately in the news. So those are the bills I was going to go over tonight. I have some other thoughts, though. One of the easiest ways to follow bills in the legislature is to use a to use a website called fastdemocracy.com. You can follow bills through the whole legislative process, and you can actually, I'm sorry, there it is, Fast Democracy. You can look up bills by type of bill, or you can look up by number. Like if you put in criminal justice, all the bills related to criminal justice that have been that have dropped in the House or the Senate will show up. Here's the Pardons and Parole Board that Chris England wants to create a Criminal Justice Policy Development Council. Here's law enforcement officers and retirement benefits show up. Really any bill that has to do with criminal justice. The drug court accountability bill that changed drug courts to accountability courts shows up in when you search just on criminal justice. You can also search by the House bill number, like HB 7 is the one that is about procedures for arrest and detention and transportation of undocumented people, immigrants, and the reporting requirements, which is a really mean-spirited bill. That'll show up, and you can see all the different bills. You can track them by topics too, and I track these topics. And if you track these topics and and you've registered with this website, they will send you daily or twice daily or weekly, depending on what you ask for, progress of each one of these bills. So I love fastdemocracy.com. And if you haven't ever used it and you like to follow the legislative bills, it's a great tool to use to do that. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and open things up for questions. Are there other bills that you're interested in that you want to find out about? There's just so much. I heard somebody say in Alabama Reflector that our legislature is like trying to swallow water from a running hose. Like you can't swallow fast enough to ingest all the possibilities.
Yeah, it's just very overwhelming. At the start of every legislative session, I tell myself, like, hey, I'm gonna keep track of everything, and then more happens, and then life stuff happens. Just so I feel like it's designed that way to overwhelm you and for you
Oh,
not to pay attention.
and I'm sorry. Oh, but maybe it was me. I was going to say the other thing that happens toward the end is they start to drop new bills and then pass them quickly before anyone realizes and can mount up an opposition to them. I think that school library bill with the parent rights component is one of those. It was just dropped on the 10th. And so I think Read Freely and the freedom of speech folks have really had problems mobilizing against that bill because it was dropped so rapidly and it's making its way pretty quickly through the House. So I don't know. Pretty it's pretty difficult to um, understand how everything happens because it happens so quickly. One of the other places that I like to find out stuff when legislature's in session is two news sources, and one is Alabama Reflector, which is Brian Lyman's news source out of Montgomery, and they do weekly wrap-ups of what passed the House and what passed the Senate and what Governor Ivey signed and what's died in committee. And the Alabama Political Reporter also does the same thing during the legislative session. So um, if you if you subscribe to those, they usually send out pretty routine updates during the legislative session where they go through everything that passed and everything that was held up. The other thing I like to do is to go ahead and follow a lot of issues groups because I think they're the ones that keep up the best with issues that they care about. For instance, Alabama River Alliance, you'll find out about any clean water or changes in dumping regulations, those kinds of bills that come through. Alabama Arise is always really good about telling its members about healthcare legislation, about sales tax legislation, about legislation that affects impoverished people. Alabama Appleseed is good on criminal justice legislation. Um, the Alabama Coalition for Immigrant Justice is good for immigration legislation, which is almost always routinely in Alabama mean stuff. Moms Demand Action, gun violence or gun restriction or gun not restriction legislation, and then the League of Women Voters on voting, either voting suppression bills or voting restoration bills are good ones to follow too. If you're looking for the people that follow their issues closely and can encourage you to take action as soon as they know something has moved in the legislative session, those groups are really good to be able to follow. Anyway, Brian, were we going to talk about the contacting your elected officials form? We forgot. It's okay.
Forgot. I'm sorry.
Well,
But yeah,
let's talk about it, even if we can't show it, because it's a really good point.
yeah.
Ju-
So
ju-
the idea is to help. Um, One thing that I've noticed from talking to folks, at least down here in Mobile, is a lot of people don't know who their elected officials are, or if they do know who they are, they don't know how to contact them. If they don't know and they're trying to find that information, it's hard to find as well. So there's like all these barriers to it. So what I've done is developed a worksheet where it has blanks where you could fill in. Um, it comes with instructions, right? Instructions on how to find your elected officials. So it'll tell you the website, it'll tell you exactly step by step where to go, and it'll also connect you to a database of contact information that we've already compiled together. So we've done the heavy work of finding the phone numbers and email addresses that you need. So all you need to do is look it up, find out first which districts you are in, write them down, and then you go to the other sheets and you could just start filling in their names and their contact information. And the idea is to put that on your refrigerator, magnets, and anytime you hear a bill that you can't stand, that you're passionate about, you have all the information right there in order to contact your elected officials. So it's a good way of, civic education one-on-one. It's something that I wasn't taught in public school here in Alabama. I don't know how it is in other states, but at least here they don't really teach you that. Much less my parents didn't know either. So it's one tool that we could have in order to help folks with it. I know there's like other websites that try to help you find your elected officials. Um, One of the biggest issues that I find is that it doesn't have very down to the local level. For example, your city council, your mayor, their contact information, what district that's in. All the other websites they have like who your U.S. House representatives is, Congress and state, but not down to the local level. And so that's kind of trying to encourage each county party to help their members and constituents and folks to find all their information on a local level. Who's the local school board? How to contact them. That's a big one that we tend to overlook. So the idea with UDeval is to upload this resource on our website so that others across the state can replicate it, um, and start educating folks in Alabama on how to who their elected officials are and how to contact them. Um, yeah.
Mhm. No, I mean, so far, Brian's done Mobile County. And I've done Shelby County. The contact your elected physicians. Oh my gosh, contact your elected officials worksheet is available in Shelby County. And the guideline for how to fill out the worksheet and the names of all the city and town council members of all the little towns and cities in Shelby County and in Mobile County are done. So if you need it for Shelby County or you want to see an example of how we did it, how Brian did Mobile County and how I did Shelby County, they're very much available. On Aren't they in the Udaville? Do we
It
have them
was it
Udaville Drive?
was until we updated our website, and I haven't made the transition there. But
Oh,
in the meantime, if y'all just contact us via email, or if you're on social media, send a message to us and we can help connect you with that.
yeah. And our contact your elected officials worksheet comes out every month in our newsletter. It's just a routine part of our newsletter that's in there every month. So if people want access to print out that worksheet and then you can use the QR code to find the guidelines for filling it out and who the city council members are. And I think there's even some school boards on there. I can't remember, but I think I did at least the county school board members are on there. Um, so, and of course, House members and Senate members. So anyway.
Do we know? My concern, I guess, is whenever I post that on social media, I'm always afraid the other side will call them and say, "Good job for being evil." Do we know? Is it mostly
Huh?
whenever I post something on social media about call your elected officials, I'm always concerned that maybe Republicans will too.
Well, they're citizens and they can certainly call if they wish.
Yeah.
I really don't want to try to keep
Yeah, that's true.
the Alabamian from calling their elected official, even when they have a opinion that differs from mine. So I don't worry about that particular thing too much.
Yeah, me neither. My position is, we live in a democracy where the voices of every registered voter, US citizen matters. And so we can get a better sense of what the people want if everyone participates in that. So we want everyone, whether Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, or whatever, to express their point of views. Because what we're seeing right now is a lot of people don't participate, they don't vote, they don't raise their voices. And so you have a very minority, loud percentage of the population that is speaking, and our representatives think, oh, that's what the people of Alabama want. They want the Ten Commandments in the schools, and that's not true. I think most people here don't want that, but they're just not. They've become so jaded or disengaged or apathetic towards politics, and that's what I want to change. So, as Democrats, I think it's important part of our values to want everyone to participate, whether they are Democrat or not.
Yeah, and I agree. Rich, you unmuted? Are you do you
Yeah,
did
I was just going to say that in most cases, below the legislative level, these representatives and county commissioners and public school board members, they don't get any comment from the public because most people don't go to the school board meetings. They don't go to the county commission meetings. And if just a few Democrats or people in opposition to some of this stuff showed up or wrote them or called them, you would see a market change in the way they actually conduct themselves because they think that everyone is happy with what they're doing because nobody is actually reacting to the policies that they're implementing. So contacting them is the biggest help you could do for democracy, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Knowing who your local officials are,
Mhm.
contacting them when you don't like something, and then voting for somebody who shares your values. It'd all be good things. Yeah.
Hey, can I piggyback a little bit on that, if you don't mind,
Oh, for
Brian? Going
sure.
back, I think that you really have an awesome tool that we were discussing down in Clinton. It was brought that we said we speak a lot on differences, but I think as human beings, we all share some of the same commonalities, right? And I think what can be more disappointing with us Democrats is sometimes um, we fall into the polarization that maybe Republicans or MAGA may be doing, that at the end of the day you can still score votes by trying to find that commonality versus the difference, right? Uh, and then going back, I think one of the biggest things that really need to be looked at right now is when you were speaking on criminal justice and undocumented immigrants and some of the tactics that's being used, the 200 and something cases that's potentially probably going to get overturned, or DNA being brought into the process, is starting to look okay. That affects Republicans and Democrats, right? And when you look at Donald Trump even going to the point, okay, we get into these successes. Let's say we make them at a state level, but then at a federal level, with him talking about, okay, now we're going to do this prison industrial complex ordeal with Venezuela and start shipping some of our domestic, what we would consider prisoners, into another country, causing a probably amnesty disaster. Is how do we start being more proactive in a way to say, okay, we see where the storm is coming, and we're not more passive of just talking with representatives, but really making them aware. You know, these are the issues that you've been elected for, uh, whether Democrat or Republican. And I think from a common perspective, then that's going to help change the minds of the people as long as we're on the grounds grassrooting and doing the leg work and the footwork. It will all come together, because eventually a lot of this is just going to affect us all, whether we're Democrat or Republican. And I think this is our opportunity, really, where we can score more votes by looking more bipartisan and really reaching the common person and their goals, which is going to be the majority. That's going to drive them to the polls, um, and having access as to what Brian have, that's readily available, that can drive them to their phone and do that easy template, make a difference, and move on while still sharing the same value.
Yeah. Yeah, I think making our voices heard in things that we have in common. I mean, Americans care about their families. Americans care about being able to support their families and put food on the table. Americans care about their education for their children, and they care about their children being healthy and happy, and they care about their neighbors. So there's common ground for all of us that we can find if we look for it. Uh, but it's really important that our elected representatives know what our values are so that they can represent us. It's just really important. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, me too. I'd like to piggyback on what James said. I think it seems that there are certain people who want Americans to be divided, right? So they want us to not to hate each other, to think of politics as a football game where it's one team and the other, and really it's not. We're one country who are trying to improve everyone's quality of life. So trying to ignore the folks who are trying to polarize politics and really start talking to our neighbors, people in our cities, our towns, and find out what we can agree on, and then mobilizing people to make those changes. I think there's a lot of folks, Democrat, Republican, and other, who want to see improvements in healthcare. That's a big issue. They want, they want to legalize marijuana. Um, I could think of quite other few things on there. So it's really getting people to come together, to help them aware of politicians who don't want us to come together, who wants us to fight each other over issues that we might not ever agree on, like abortion, or LGBT or trans people in sports. They want to have those distracting issues and ignore all the things that actually matter to us. And I think we see that in the Alabama legislature, right, Marsha? Like, how many bills does it really help people?
I know. I
Um,
mean, can you imagine why in the world do people submit 1,100 bills in a legislative season when they could submit a few the valuable ones? Uh, yeah, I don't know.
1,100 bills, that's ridiculous.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. Richard.
I just wanted to say that most of those bills don't even come from people in Alabama. They don't come from the actual legislators themselves. They come from PACs, conservative organizations, and other places. That's the whole thing is getting people involved because most of the legislation coming out of the legislature doesn't impact the day-to-day lives of Alabamians. We are more of a middle state. We're not a far right state or a far left state. We're a middle. Most of us are middle of the road, or moderate, if you want to say. But most of the legislation coming out of the legislature is far right because it comes from far right think tanks and support groups that actually have pre-written most of these bills. Now, some of them are legitimately Alabama homegrown bills, but most of them come from think tanks and conservative organizations that have already passed these bills in other southern states or red states. So it's not exactly the will of the people that's being taken care of by the legislature. It's the
Yeah.
will of PACs. And
Mhm. That reminds me to mention something else that people can do. A lot of the issues-based organizations in Alabama Arise, Moms Demand Action, Alabama Rivers Alliance, just to name a few, have lobby days. Days when they go, or advocacy days, they're not really lobbyists, but advocacy days where normal people join with the issues-based nonprofit and get educated and then go and visit their legislators face to face. And those, if I would recommend everybody take advantage of being able to do that and go on an advocacy day at least once or twice in your life, because you learn a lot about not just about how the legislature works, like the list I put up, but more the steps, like walking up the steps to get to the viewing portion of the house, or knowing how many corners you have to go around to find your representative's little office back in the back corner of the house or whatever. And knowing that there are legislative pages who will tell you where your legislator's office is if you ask them. Knowing all that really makes it easier to understand how the legislature works or doesn't work. So I'd highly recommend that anybody go at least for one advocacy day or maybe two advocacy days if they've never done those. Oh, that's a really good question, James. Most of the time, you need to know what your organization is that you want to go to do an advocacy day with, and look on their website. Like if it's Alabama Rise, who does healthcare, and they do grocery tax. They do a lot of the issues that are around trying to support people in poverty. So Alabama Rise website has that. They would say when they're advocacy days. So does Alabama Rivers Alliance, other ones. I don't know where there's an actual place where all advocacy days are listed, but that would be a great service to people if there was something like that, for sure.
Thank you for that information.
Yeah.
I did it with like professional associations too, virtually mostly, like national healthcare related nurses, dietitians, nutrition, diabetes, etc.
I think they have, I mean, all the American Heart Association and
Oh yeah.
American Cancer Society both have advocacy days down in Montgomery for two that I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah, they do.
The last one
Yeah.
I went to, um, I saw quite a few other groups as well. Like one was about pets and like the leaving them on a leash in the thing. So there was a group came up, all wearing matching t-shirts to meet the representatives and talk about it. So I think it's beautiful when we have citizens who are engaged with our local governments because that's how progress is made.
That's right. My own professional group, the local, the Alabama chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, we do an advocacy day every year too. In fact, the first time I ever went to an advocacy day, it was with them. So anyway, any other thoughts? Any bills that I mean, I went over so many, I was starting to get bored myself with going over them all. But are there any bills? One I really wanted to mention that I really wish had a chance this year was Senator Coleman Madison's bill to actually fund the transportation fund, the state transportation fund that's existed, I think, for almost a decade and has never had any money put in it for public transportation. And it, once again, that bill just got nowhere. And I hate it. I hate it for us. I hate it for the people that need public transportation, which is, it should be all of us should need public transportation, right? Because it would be a better way to travel.
I was sad about that one. I was also sad. Well, medical marijuana, I don't think that went anywhere.
Didn't
They're
go any.
still stuck in limbo,
Yeah,
much less recreational.
and there was even a bill to, I think, recriminalize hemp products. I don't think it went anywhere, but there was a bill to actually go backwards on hemp. Anyway, just a lot of there's, like I said, I tried to name all the good ones that got enacted, but it's hard the balance because there's so many not so good ones or actually hurtful ones that that are making their way through the legislature. Yeah. So
Thank you,
but
Marsha, for all your information, for all this. This is wonderful.
well,
It's
the thing about this information is it's kind of dated, right? Because as of the next legislative day, it could be all wrong, right? Other than the stuff that got enacted, because there's going to be some of these bills that are going to get through committee, some are going to die in committee, some are going to make it through the House and the Senate, and they're not going to be good bills for anybody. So but at least I tried to organize things in a way that made some sense. It's tricky in our legislature to figure out how to get things to make sense. So yeah.
It was very educational and informative. I think you did a great job of explaining everything. It was, I hope a lot of people get to see it on the YouTube when it is there.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I actually learned a lot by doing it. I learned how to use that fastdemocracy.com website, and spent a lot of time also just looking at the Allison legislative website too. So
Well, I'm going to start using that website because it seemed like it was very simple and I had never seen it before. So I really appreciate that.
and once you sign up for it,
Mhm.
it sends you legislative updates that are very readable and very actionable. So I like it a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. I think I'm going to try to turn off the recording.
Oh, Marsha, I just remembered, I know there was a law they were trying to pass for early voting or voting as a holiday. Have you seen any movement on that?
No, all the voting bills that the Democrats put forward haven't moved at all out of committee at all. I'm not even sure they've had discussion within the committee.
Oh,
Yeah, I checked it when I was checking on the voting bills. I was really disappointed to see that none of them gained any traction. Yeah.
So, quick question with that. With all of these bills, have they ever been reviewed, let's say from a Democratic perspective, to say how many of them overlap, where someone is just simply addressing the same concern from another perspective, or it's an add-on where to a certain degree, okay, if we can just get something passed that is bipartisan, then you can start consolidating some of those bills because they have more similarities than they have being different bills. Like, is there like a think tank for that?
Yeah.
What?
You know, they do. They're actually, I mean, I have to say that there really has been an attempt for some bipartisanship. The maternal health bill that passed that made Medicaid easier to get for pregnant women, that was a collaborative effort among both Republican and Democratic representatives and senators. So that's an example of a bipartisan bill. The bill, the second, what's it called? Second chance bill, the one that gave another chance to those prisoners who were in for life for nonviolent offenses. That was a bipartisan bill, and was worked on by both parties. But there's a lot of things that the parties just don't agree on, and so they struggle with finding common ground. But those are just two I can name. Yeah, but you're right.
So is it more we can get along at a state level and then federal is legislation begin to make people become bipartisan and or more partisan rather, to the point where it's like we're just not gaining the traction at more of a local level than at a
Yeah,
federal level.
it just depends. I mean, I think there are bipartisan talks going on even in our crazy Congress right now, but it's hard because there's so much rancor and rhetoric. Not the rhetoric is so divisive that it makes it more difficult. For instance, I mean, and I don't want to make this sound too sexist, but it seems like the women are able to do more bipartisan stuff. For instance, there's a child care bill in the Senate right now, in the U.S. Senate, that looks like it's very bipartisan, and um, uh, so there are still people that are trying to do some bipartisan work, but right now, because of all the talk and the divisive rhetoric, it's very hard to find common ground. It's just very frustrating.
Yeah, because if you remember back in school when we were all growing up, if the bully was by himself, he seemed to got along with you when he was by himself, and you can have a one-on-one. But then when he was around his constituents, then that's when things kind of changed, right? So it's like, what's the strategy where we can hold feet to the fire at a more common local ground without being overshadowed by federal legislation?
That is the question, isn't it? And it may be the question for some future discussions on Blue School, but I'm not sure I have an answer right yet. But it's a great question. So, I appreciate y'all hanging in to the end of this, and I'm turning the recording off right now. So good night to all the people that watch this later.
Thank you.